Anxiety. Have you tried to heal your anxiety? Have you received treatment for anxiety, done self-help, but it keeps coming back? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Jessica Johns-Green. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work with a range of mood disorders, including anxiety, as well as body issues that includes eating disorders and relationship issues, things like anger management, communication, and trauma. And let's talk about anxiety today. If you've struggled with anxiety, you are certainly not alone. Millions of people around the world are going to be diagnosed with anxiety, may self-diagnose with anxiety, and will look for a way to solve it. Oftentimes they go to a doctor, they might search the internet, they might look for a video like this or a self-help book, might look for a therapist. Maybe you've done some or all of those. Anxiety is a problem that has a pretty high chance of it recurring. If you've had an experience with anxiety attacks, panic, super high times of anxiety, chances are you will have it again. Why is that? What's going on? What's going on with these treatments? And why does it keep coming back? I have some ideas about where the treatment serves us, where the treatment falls short, and I'll finish up with an overarching sort of philosophy and how that affects our ability to recover. So, first of all, anxiety, what is it? It is the body's response to a threat. In a nutshell, that's what it is. All those things that we feel, the heart might beat fast. We might notice our breathing become different. Sometimes we're not even aware of those things, but it's sort of a sense of impending doom, or the mind almost goes blank. We kind of go into a freeze state, or we can't keep our thoughts, away from that thing that is bothering us or upsetting us. It may affect sleep. It may affect our digestion, our eating habits. We might have a range of really unhelpful ways to deal with anxiety, ways that maybe calm us temporarily. We might avoid something, we might numb ourselves in some way, maybe, for example, with a substance or some form of distraction, procrastination. But in the end, it doesn't actually fix the problem and anxiety comes back. So if you've had an experience of that kind of thing, anxiety, panic attacks in the same family, right? Same thing. Chances are you have looked for help. When you go to a therapist, when you go to a doctor, when you look at a lot of self-help books, it might be useful to recognize that there is a certain model of anxiety that is used primarily in our modern society, in our Western society, and that is a medical model of anxiety. This is really, really important and, for the most part, kind of useful for us, because in the way back old days, if somebody had a panic attack or a really bad problem with mental health, including anxiety or depression, something like that, they could be stigmatized in a lot of really negative ways. So difficulties with mood and emotions were obviously seen as spiritual or moral deficiencies in a person, So people might be sent away, maybe to some kind of place where they could be secluded, maybe, even a prison. Quite often they were seen as, having been maybe, cursed or punished by God in a way, that they had done something to deserve this. So some of the pioneers, early pioneers of mental health as we know it today, were really trying to change the way that we saw mental health, and we're trying to help the world at large to see that, hey, this is more like a medical problem. It's more like, when, say, an organ goes wrong in the body, it's not necessarily that person's fault. There might be some sort of biological reason for that. There might be something going on in the environment that has made that organ go into difficulties. And so, slowly, this way of thinking about mental illnesses grew, almost thinking about it like a disorder of the brain, right? There's some processing issue. And from that, one of the main ways of working with anxiety that we have nowadays was born: cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you are seeking treatment, especially if it's going to be covered by insurance, chances are it's cognitive behavioral therapy or related to cognitive behavioral therapy in some way. And that's because cognitive behavioral therapy marries up really, really well with this medical, biological view of anxiety. It's also a treatment that is highly manualized, meaning that each stage of the treatment, there's a certain protocol to follow. And that protocol is supposedly validated by research showing that if someone has this level of anxiety, that after this many sessions, they should be feeling this much better. Okay, so insurance companies will love that, right? The medical community, that fits right in there. And it doesn't contradict in any way this sort of medical view of mental illness, of anxiety, that something has gone wrong inside with the way that the brain and the body is processing information, the way the brain is functioning. Something has gone wrong with that's making this person have this difficult experience. So there's a lot of usefulness to that. It can help explain a lot of what's going on, because in cognitive behavioral therapy, what we look at, cognition means the way that we think. Behavioral means what do we do, our behavior, our actions, our choices, our impulses. So there's a huge chunk of an experience of anxiety and healing something to do with anxiety that will benefit from understanding, how am I thinking about this? How am I thinking about this stressful situation? And are those thoughts maybe spiraling me into a place where the emotion feels overwhelming? And then secondly, how am I responding to that? For everyone, there's going to be helpful ways that we respond, things that actually ease the anxiety or are functional in some way. And there's going to be things that make it worse unintentionally, but do make it worse and are dysfunctional in some way. So cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very useful for that. So chances are, if you're someone who has struggled with anxiety at some point in your life and you've tried to do anything to fix it, gone to therapy, got a self-help book, talked to a doctor, the approach that has been taken with you is probably based somehow in this biological / cognitive behavioral therapy view, this medicalized view of anxiety. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is great benefit to be had from that. Myself, large part of my training and early part of my career was heavily grounded and focused in cognitive behavioral therapy. And clients can benefit, people can benefit. I myself can benefit from some of the techniques, ways of thinking that are pillars of this form of therapy. But there are problems. And so that's what I want to talk with you about. That's what this video is about, because there is a giant relapse rate. So in research that has been done on cognitive behavioral therapy and how effective it is, many of these studies report that something in the range of maybe 20-something%, a little bit more, a little bit less, have relapsed. So that means that they've had anxiety, they've had a cognitive behavioral therapy, they've gotten better, and then the anxiety has come back. This is, important. That's a chunk of people that are continuing to suffer. And if you are going through that, you know how disheartening it is to be like, okay, that worked, now it's not working. What is going on? It's a very helpless place to be. The other thing that's interesting too, and that, in my kind of curious / critical way of looking at it, that I wonder is, there's a certain group of people that are even going to come back and tell a researcher how well they're doing, right? So on one hand, if you're doing really, really well, you might not come back to say, hey, I'm doing great. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe those people are more motivated. Okay, just question mark over that. Um, the other thing is if you're doing really, really bad, what are the chances that you have the capacity, that you have the bandwidth to go back to a researcher and talk about that? It may be that stuff has crashed and burned so badly that you are not even in that universe to be even thinking about going back to that. So these numbers themselves are under question. What we can say, though, for sure, is that it's not going to work perfectly. It's not going to work forever for everybody, right? Some people may benefit. The other thing that's kind of interesting about cognitive behavioral therapy is because it lends itself so well to research because it's kind of manualized, it's kind of a protocol to it. You can easily compare this person's outcome to that person's outcome because the therapy itself is the same or at least similar enough across the board that there are numerous studies. And what some researchers have been able to do is to take a ton of studies and sort of collate them all together to look at some of the overarching statistics about the effectiveness of cognitive behavioral therapy. One of the interesting tidbits about that to me is that amongst these many studies, when they take a big wide view, that the dropout rate, the amount of people who say, yes, I'll take part in your research about anxiety, about CBT for anxiety, yes, I will take part in your research project, but then later say, I'm out, I'm leaving, right? I don't want to finish this study with you, can be between 50 to 75%, depending on the study. Now that seems huge, right? So if I was being super gregarious, I would say maybe those people got really better really fast. And then they thought, I'm just living my best right now and I don't need this research study anymore. But the more cynical side of me wonders if these people didn't think, you know what, this is not working at all and I don't have the time for this. Or maybe they got so much worse that they couldn't continue. So question marks, right? I think that the reason why I want to share this is just to sort of give you hope and validate, right? I know it doesn't sound hopeful, but that you're not alone, right? If you've had a treatment, if you've had a therapy for anxiety, if you've read a self-help book, even if your doctor has tried to help you through with some ideas, even medication, you're not alone if it's not working, and it can't just be just you, right? Because there are so many people that are going through a similar thing. So there's something about the way that we're working with anxiety that is not working. So what are my thoughts? I have three things that I think either the cognitive behavioral therapy / medical model does not do a good enough job of incorporating, but that you can, right? That you can either with your own therapy or in yourself on your own, that you can incorporate these things that maybe will improve your outcomes. And then I have one final thought about just, the medical idea of anxiety itself. There's something wrong with your brain that makes it harder for you to engage with life when you're having anxiety or some other mental health problem that I think is important for us to think about and may just unlock a little something for you in how you approach yourself, how you approach your difficulties. So number one for me is history, right? So in this sort of medical cognitive behavioral therapy way of approaching anxiety, history is, important. It's kind of like a little footnote though, like, okay, so you have this thought that comes up when you're feeling anxious. Let's think about that thought. Is it helpful or not? Okay, where does it come from? Oh, right. So your mother or your father or whatever, or this happened in your childhood. Okay, that made you think that. We'll just change the way you think, and it makes logical sense, but that also can sort of, pull the rug out from underneath you when it's not as easy just to change the way you think because there's a deep ingrained history. If you're someone who, like a lot of us, have grown up in a situation where there's been anxiety, you've had anxiety as a child, maybe in something in your environment was not calm and settled. And I'm not talking about even, huge abuse or giant trauma, but just, unsettled enough to where you weren't able to access this sort of calm, relaxed state in your body and have that be the baseline. If that was not the baseline for you, then you may have this sort of baseline that is actually like high anxiety. And by the time you're seeking help for anxiety, it's just sort of broken through that baseline into an extreme peak, you know, but because of the history that you've had, not really having an opportunity for that body to be calm, regulated, the parts of our nervous system that are actually active when the body is calm are completely different from the ones that are active when our body is anxious. And it's kind of like a muscle in a way. If those calm nervous system parts are not used to being awake and alive and used on a regular basis, they're actually not going to be as strong. And so we need to find ways to strengthen that. And this, a lot of parts of your history may have informed just how your nervous system responds in a situation. So I think history is important. How do you work with that? Obviously how you think and how you behave is super, super important, but there also needs to be an understanding of the body and compassion with the body, learning to observe, feel your breath, and to seek out calm and build that calm part of your nervous system slowly, as if you were building a muscle that hadn't been used. And I know that sounds complicated, but seeking out help that has to do with calming the nervous system, activating the vagus nerve, somatic approaches, even things like meditation, deep breathing, yoga can help to tune you back in and help to heal that sort of baseline that might be at a super high level. The second thing that I would bring up that may be kind of an issue is awareness, So if you have had this sort of peak of anxiety for whatever reason, and you've sought out some help, self-help, therapy, whatever it is, what you're doing is you are starting to tune your awareness into yourself, and particularly into this sensation, anxiety being in the kind of target sensation. I want to understand more about this. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Right? And as you build that awareness, you might discover more than you expected. I'm not saying that this is definitely the case for everyone, but certainly I have run into a fair amount of people that would describe themselves like, my life is, really just, normal life, not anxious. And once they start digging in and asking questions and tuning into, gosh, how do I feel on a day-to-day basis? How do I feel moment to moment? They discover, wow, I am actually tense most of the time and I didn't even know it. Now, that doesn't mean that your anxiety got worse. That just means that you tuned your antenna in to what was going on. So building awareness is awesome. Don't be discouraged from it, but it is a double-edged sword, because once you become aware, you can't kind of become unaware. And you may discover that it's a sort of more pervasive set of feelings and situations and emotions, a bigger anxiety problem than you expected. Don't be afraid of that, right? Don't be afraid of that. And I'll talk more about that with you in a moment at the end. But anxiety is something that is an important signal from your body, and it's your body trying to call to you. It's your insides, if you will, calling you to say, hey, there's something here. Please pay attention. Please pay attention to me. The third thing sort of builds on the previous two. What is the idea about how things compound? We have a huge tendency to really, really compartmentalize. Hey, work is over. I should be relaxed right now. Hey, I finished that traumatic relationship. I should feel fine by now. Or hey, I'm feeling anxiety at work, but the problem isn't really that big. There must be something wrong with me. Why am I doing that? But your body is an amazing bit of equipment. It's got this nervous system that is picking up on a huge amount of information all the time. Your brain, your consciousness, if you want to call it that, or at least your kind of logical brain is very slow, and it only has room to process a certain number of things at any one time. So, what you are maybe aware of in the moment is only a tiny fraction compared to all the things that your body is picking up on. It's amazing to me how many times I meet someone who says, I have anxiety. It comes to me from nowhere. And I say, okay, well, let's just, talk about how you feel, talk about your life. And out it comes slowly, slowly is a whole list of things that might even on the surface sound like low level stress, but they all compound, and your body doesn't deal with things compartmentally. It deals with it as a whole. So, my dog got sick, my car got broke, my bills, I'm having trouble paying them. I had an argument with someone. I have a deadline at work. I'm not sleeping well, I'm not eating well. All of those things compound to make the body in a high state of stress. And then that's when the feeling of anxiety is going to come and say, hello, I'm here. And even though you might just be feeling it when you're kind of, doing something that seems like, well, this shouldn't be that stressful. I'm just getting an oil change for my car. It's annoying, but it's not stressful. But I'm feeling high anxiety. It may just be that all of these things are compounding. And that's actually an important signal. So this leads me to the last thing that I would say, and I think is, take it or leave it, use it as you will. There is a very important part to the medical model of mental problems like anxiety, a very important, useful aspect to cognitive behavioral therapy. But I think that another perspective might be helpful if you've had a recurring problem and you're starting to feel disheartened. I think it's important for you to hear that the medical model is just that. It is a model. The cognitive behavioral therapy model is just that. It is just a model. It's one way of looking at anxiety. It doesn't mean it's the truth. And it can be very important to take what you need from that model and not say to yourself, hey, this anxiety problem means I have a broken brain, right? Or whatever. I have a broken cortisol system, or, I'm going to need a, something medical for the rest of my life. Not to diss those things, right? If they're needed, they're needed. But this idea of this organ in your body being broken, it was a very important idea when it started to come to the fore way back when, because it saved people from being ostracized, stigmatized. But nowadays, we sort of can turn it on ourselves and make it a sort of label that can really disempower. Oh, I have an anxiety problem. Oh, I can't possibly change the way I feel because I'm a highly anxious person, right? There's a number of ways that you might hear yourself say that. And just to be really careful with that, because anxiety is something that is part of the human experience. It's not something that we need to say we should never feel, but it also isn't a sign that you're broken. You are meant to be able to regulate, to be calm. But if you're having anxiety, broken, the idea of a broken emotional system or brain is maybe more disempowering than it is helpful. Instead, I find it really, really useful and sometimes very important to think about anxiety as an invitation, as a signal. Something here needs your attention. It might be like a fire alarm going off in your body. It might be like a little red dot notification coming up on your phone. But whether it feels big like fire alarm or small like notification, it's something that your system is saying, please, we need attention here. Maybe you're stressed because there's certain things in modern life that are stressful. And that's hard to hear, because if your body is drawing attention to, something over and over again, it might mean that that something needs to change, that something needs to shift. That might not be the best news. That might be kind of uncomfortable news, but your body wants you to be well and healthy, which is why it has a signal like anxiety. So if I was to phrase that in a different way again, it would be that medical model says you are broken, but there's other ways to think about anxiety in that, it's a helpful system that your body is inviting you, asking you to change something that's really, really important. How you change it, what you do, you know what? Don't feel disheartened by that too. That might sound big and scary. It doesn't mean you need to throw everything out that makes you feel anxious. It just means that you need to send your attention, your awareness, your consciousness to that area and figure out how to manage it, whether it's to stay within it and regulate your system or to make changes so that the system itself is a little bit different for you. So I would love to hear about your experiences. As always, please leave a comment with any of your thoughts, your questions. Again, a like, a subscribe, I would be honored. And until next time, be well.